certainly the Biden-Trump debate was caused a bit of a shockwave across Tokyo. I think in many ways the Japanese government, Kishida's party, the LDP, had been pretty certain that Biden had this well at hand. And so I think in many ways now there's a reappraisal going on about the odds of a Trump 2.0 presidency. And I think in many ways, you can argue that Japan was collateral damage from Trump's initial presidency. In many ways, a lot of his trade war policies were aimed at China, but Japan's economy suffered greatly during that period. And so in many ways, you've seen Prime Minister Kishida cozy up to Joe Biden in very significant ways over the last 3 years or so, the last 3.5 years, very successfully. And so now Japan has to, in many ways, go back to the drawing board, if you will, and at least begin bracing for a Trump 2.0 presidency, which is not going down very well in the halls of Tokyo power.
What does it tell you, Willie, when the overtures from Japan to the Trump team, well ahead of November, are being, the Trump team is sort of just giving them the cold shoulder? What does that tell you?
Well, you've had former Prime Minister Aso. He did get a meeting with Trump a couple of months ago. That was considered significant. But I also have to wonder, I think Donald Trump might have been having to Google former Prime Minister Aso. In many ways, I'm not sure how fruitful that meeting was. Yeah, I mean, the Japanese government really does feel that they're in the dark here in terms of Japan, the Trump administration's 2.0 plans for Asia. The Project 2025 that we hear so much about in the U.S. is in many ways panicking Japan. One of the things that Japan is worried about in a second Trump term will be the extent to which Trump tries to shake Japan down for essentially for protection money to maintain U.S. troops. In the first Trump administration, Trump tried to get Japan to pay $8 billion U.S. a year to house U.S. troops. Will we see a return to that? Will we see a return to Trump has talked about a 60% tariff on Japanese goods. He's talked about a 100% tariff on car imports. Will that include Japanese automakers? And so there's a lot of uncertainty here at the moment about what the next 5 years could look like.
Yeah, William, if the Quad is the equivalent of NATO in the Indo-Pacific region, and if it is Trump 2.0, is that security alliance going to be intact under his administration?
Odds are no. I mean, if you think about the main democracies in Asia, the extent to which they have tried to cozy up to Joe Biden, think about the Philippines. You've had fairly new President Marcos of the Philippines. He's made a lot of overtures towards Washington. He's been very strong in terms of, taking a stronger stance towards China. What does he do at this point? If you're President Yoon of South Korea, you really have staked a lot of your presidency on closer ties with the U.S. and Japan at the same time, this kind of trilateral relationship. Where do you go from here? If you're Southeast Asia, where do you go from here? So I think in many ways, Asia is still reeling from the events of recent days. And one of the big issues, one of the big, transmission mechanisms people are worried about is U.S. treasuries. Asia is sitting on about $3 trillion of U.S. treasuries. Trump's fiscal policies, tax cuts, who knows where that leaves Asia's $3 trillion. Trump has talked at times about reneging on U.S. debt, actually defaulting. Yes. He's talked about devaluing the U.S. dollar. So if you're sitting on $1.2 trillion of U.S. debt like Japan is, or $770 billion of U.S. debt like China is, you're paying very close attention to who Trump picks as Treasury Secretary and what they say. So it's going to be quite a fascinating few years.